And welcome to episode 488 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Grace Winburn.
Michael O'Malley.
Nadine Smith.
In today's episode, we're going to be wrapping up our M. Night Shyamalan series. It's been a good one, y'all.
Saying goodnight to M. Night.
Saying goodnight to M. Night. But in part one, we're going to talk about movies that we saw this week and over the course of the last couple of weeks. And Michael, I'm going to start with you because you saw The Talk of the Vatican.
The Talk of the Vatican, Conclave.
It's Real Housewives of the Vatican, to be honest.
It is. I didn't know anything about this movie going in except that it had something to do with the Pope dying. And in the back of my head, I was thinking, I don't know why I had convinced myself of this, but I thought it was, like that subplot in Godfather 3 where like they try to kill the Pope. Yes. Like I thought it was going to be like a murder mystery with the Pope dying and like who done it. I went on election night because I wanted something to distract me from the election. And instead of a murder mystery about the Pope, what I got was a movie about them electing a new Pope. And it's also kind of a metaphor for politics. So it didn't keep my mind off of the presidential election, especially when people are throwing out lines like voting for the least bad option. And there's like the liberal, progressive side kind of infighting. And then there's the right wing side who seems to be like ascendant and also kind of cool because he vapes. Great shots of like Cardinals vaping.
They don't in the future, they won't release smoke when they choose the new Pope. They will release clouds of vape juice.
The movie is halfway there, to be honest. They have a little like chemical thing that they put into the furnace to release the smoke. So who knows? That could be like a e-cigarette compound. I don't know.
Dank clouds of weed. That's the kind of Pope I want.
Hell yeah. Well, you almost get it in this movie.
You do.
So anyway, I knew I was kind of in for a time when, again, I didn't really know that much about the movie walking in. I truly just was like, I got to do something besides watching this fucking map. And so you're like sitting in the movie and like Stanley Tucci walks in, and then John Lithgow, and then like it's like all these like very
white guys,
all these like distracting faces, like who are supposed to be these like high-ranking cardinals, and it's immediately funny.
You also have Isabella Rossellini as like the head nun.
Right. Yeah. So like, and of course, Ray Fiennes is the protagonist, basically the guy who is chosen by the late Pope to be in charge of the conclave. Mr. Conclave himself. And I didn't really know what it involved to choose a new pope. I knew cardinals chose a pope, but apparently what happens is that all the cardinals have to come to the Vatican and they get sequestered in the Vatican, like no in and out. Like they have to be trapped in here. It's like a bottle episode, except they're picking the pope. And so these cardinals have nothing to do but kind of backstab each other figuratively. There's no actual backstabbing, unfortunately. And so most of it is them like talking in like hushed tones in these like stairwells and stuff about like who's going to get votes and that sort of thing. And it's pretty entertaining at times. Like it's fairly transparently silly about some of this stuff. Like Zach said, like Real Housewives of the Vatican sort of, things where secrets get unleashed, revealed. There's drama. There's, again, dramatic vape hits. Like, honestly, the best shot in the whole movie is something really dramatic has happened in the cafeteria where they all are eating. Like there's been a shouting match or whatever, and then like the camera cuts to the evil like right wing like Trump cardinal who's like basically make Catholicism great again. Like he literally has a speech later on about how like Muslims are animals and stuff. But it just cuts to him after this big scene of like chaos, and he just like takes a huge like drag on his vape pen and like is clouded in.
It's like a silly exaggerated vape pen. Like it's not like just some like little thing. It's like has like this whole structure to it. Like he's such a little diva with his vape pen. They're all little divas.
So anyway, like it's a lot of fun. The kind of core cast has a pretty good time, just doing some like meat and potatoes, like melodrama acting. I do think that like it ends up not being super compelling as like a serious political allegory. I think, it kind of goes where you would expect, and the right wing guy reveals the depths of his, monstrosity, and kind of alienates a whole bunch of people because he's revealed how truly evil his ideology is. And then all the monks vote for this kind of like wild card, like kind of something I forgot to mention is that there are like also tensions among like different parts of the world as well. So there's all these like linguistic barriers among the monks, but also you have monks who have been like, or not monks, I keep saying monks, cardinals. You have cardinals who have been in like Africa versus cardinals who are from Italy. And so that's like driving tension. And you also have this kind of mysterious cardinal who has shown up who was a secret cardinal he wasn't even a cardinal until like the last minute. Like that was one of the Vatican, like the Pope's last acts was to appoint this guy as a cardinal, but he was in Kabul as like a secret cardinal hiding from, doing a secret ministry, in a obviously like majority Muslim country.
Damn.
And so, eventually, the right wing shows its ass and reveals itself to be even more evil than we thought. And the nice guys get their inspiring pick to, for a new dawn of tolerance in the Catholic Church. And, there's also a reveal later in the movie that I don't know what to think about.
It's a strange one.
It's quite a strange one, especially when the movie feels like it's almost over. And it's kind of like a crying game situation going on, unfortunately, in a way. But I don't know. So I think the movie kind of like fumbles at some key parts that keep me from like saying that it's just like a perfectly fun movie. But it is a fun movie, I think. Zach, what did you think about this movie?
Yeah, as you were describing it, I'm forgetting about how it's how fun of a movie it is. It's honestly really entertaining, and like it's kind of funny because they're kind of like pushing it up as like this Best Picture nominee or something. I'm like, nah, this is just. I saw this at like a 12:30 on a Saturday screening.
Dude, you guys see it with a bunch of old people, yeah,
with a bunch of older folks, and man. Did the twists and turns shock them because they were losing their minds.
I'm sorry, but I just looked up the end of the movie and the twist. I'm like, what? I'm not gonna spoil it, but it's like, what the fuck? Like,
it is
that's crazy. Like, I just saw a lot of people talking about like, like, oh, the kind of the spicy, saucy I was trying to combine the words nun and monk. the the scandalous religious movie. I'm just like, that's not what
yeah it's kind of like if in the
scandal I expected.
It's kind of the movie kind of does it also like it's the Sixth Sense, and they reveal that Bruce Willis is dead, and then they would stop and go, but wait, there's more. And you're like, no, that's the only thing. But no, it's honestly like a hell of a time because like the entire movie, Ray Fiennes has like this one guy who he's just like, we're in a conclave. I must be like cut off from the entire world. And he's like, all right, but I got this juicy piece of gossip. And he's like, all right, tell me what it is. And he's constantly.
Dude, that was so funny. Like he's always like this high-minded, like no information in or out. But then this dude is like running background checks on all these cardinals.
And then like there's like one part where like Ray Fiennes has this conversation with John Lithgow, and then John Lithgow's like walking away, and he's like, "I'm gonna pretend this, we didn't have this conversation." And then Ray Fiennes like yells at him in the hallway, and he's like, "But we did have it." And I'm like, "Oh my god, I love all of this. It's like a bunch of friends at a beach house, locked in there for a weekend. It's awesome." Yeah, I didn't really buy it as this like incredible political allegory either, because one, it kind of just goes in a bunch of different places, and the places it goes, you're kind of like, yeah, like this is the statement you're going to make about the state of things. It's not, there's nothing profound in it. I just like, if you want to come for that, that's fine, but you're going to stay for like the juicy diva cardinals, like talking behind everybody's back and cutting deals and stuff like that. It's honestly it's really fun. And you have to go see it with a bunch of old people because they love it.
You do either that, or you see it like on like a cable, like Sunday afternoon sort of thing. Like it's one or the other of those options.
This is like a prime time like FX on a Sunday. Oh, Conclave's on.
Yeah.
It's a good one. It's kind of funny to me that it's getting like this awards buzz, because I'm like, nah, man, the acting is like, it's all professionals being professional and like doing what they need to do. It's nothing incredible. I'm trying to think of other funny things in that movie.
I mean, some of it is just, I don't know. I guess I'm just stupid and haven't thought about these things, but it is just inherently funny. Like there's a montage of all the cardinals arriving, and like you basically only see the Vatican. So it's like this old like architecture, and obviously the cardinals are all decked out in their regalia, but they're all like have these like modern device, like they'll have like smartphones. Like there's like a montage of all of them like turning off their phones and putting it in like a lockbox basically, and it reminds me of like doing standardized testing at school where I have to take all the kids' phones.
It kind of was like that, yeah. There's this and they're all like putting it in the little box, and they're like sealing the boxes and stuff. Isabella Rossellini's really great because she's like the head nun, but she also like seems to despise every man in that place, especially Ray Fiennes. So she's just like constantly like kind of just being like making the decision to just be kind of rude and mean to them, until finally Ray Fiennes like, listen, like we gotta get the bottom of this. We gotta get the bottom of this conclave. It's fun time. Go check out Conclave. Bring your grandparents. It's a good mom and dad recommend movie.
It is, yeah. Rated PG. Like even if your parents are squeamish, bring them.
Yeah.
See what they think about the ending.
Speaking of good mom and pop movies, Grace, tell us about Heretic.
Sure, it's definitely more of a mom movie, especially if your mom was or still is in love with Hugh Grant. Then boy, do I have a movie for you. Heretic follows two young Mormon missionary women who are on their mission trip. I am not super familiar with the Mormon church. I learned everything I know about Mormonism from Real Housewives of Salt Lake, so let's just keep the Real Housewives going. They are on their mission trip, where they go door to door, knock on doors, and say, have you heard about our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, as a part of the Church of Latter-day Saints? And they have an appointment with Hugh Grant, Mr. Reed. They go to his house and on their mission, and things are a little tense and uneasy sort of from the jump. It's two sisters, Sister Barnes and Sister Paxton. Sister Barnes had left the church and then returned back to it with her mother following the death of her father, as they were searching for something to believe in, a community to belong to. So she has that sort of strength in her faith that she has returned back to the church. Sister Paxton was born into the Mormon church, and so she just sort of, it's all she's ever known. So then you sort of wonder what is really her connection to her faith, and how strong is that devotion. when they arrive at Mr. Reed's house, he seems very keen and very interested to learn more about the Mormon Church. And over the course of conversation, it seems as though he actually knows a lot about the Mormon Church. In fact, he starts to quiz these two women on their faith and on some key tenets of Mormonism, namely polygamy. He's able to fire off key dates and key players in the Mormon Church, and these girls are also able to respond right back. So that's kind of refreshing. This is a horror movie. Things take a, like I said, tense turn. There's definitely some suspense, but horror, I don't know that I would really call it that. This is also sort of as much as it deals with Mormonism, it's also about all other religions in that it's also pretty anti-religion. Mr. Reed's character calls into question all forms and iterations of any sort of organized religion and questions what the core tenet of them all is and what do they all have in common and what is the one true religion. These girls have to make a choice whether they believe or they don't believe. So that's also, do you have faith? Do you not? Belief or disbelief? Those are the two choices. It doesn't matter exactly what you believe in. Either you do or you don't. So you have that choice to make and contend with. There are some interesting scenes. It all takes place inside Mr. Reed's house, and it's sort of labyrinthine. It's like reminiscent of Dante's Inferno. Like there are layers or levels to it, and they have to, like, the only way out is through.
That's not Mormon.
That's not Mormon. No, exactly. Like I said, it's not necessarily Mormon, and it's not really Catholic, and it's not really it's not really Jewish. It's not really Protestant. It's not really. Everything is just an iteration and a copy of one true religion, which Mr. Reed believes that he has found and subscribes to, and it seems as though he wants to convert those two young girls to his religion, which is, I won't say what, but he has figured it out. I think probably the most chilling thing about this is that it's a white man like lecturing at you for hours. It's really dialogue heavy. It's just monologue after monologue, back and forth. It's philosophical discussion, rapid fire, and not a whole lot of things that I would classify horror, like no real jump scares, maybe like one or two. Nothing really like scary to look at, nothing super unsettling or unnerving, but I think it's more about making you think and question, what do you believe in? And, do you believe? But beyond that, it still felt pretty fresh, really different, like nothing I'd really ever seen before. Probably like nothing we'll ever really see again. But Hugh Grant is really stellar in this. I mean, he can tackle a monologue with all the like suave sophistication as if it were some sort of, rom-com script. He's great. He dazzles. He's charming. And the devil is charming, isn't he? Or at least that's what they taught us. But beyond that, I think that it's a unique and different watch, but nothing that I was like, oh my God, everybody has got to see this. Everybody needs to hear the gospel according to Mr. Reed. Maybe I'm the heretic at the end of the day, but I don't really have much more else to say about it.
I like the idea of Hugh Grant being like the religious version of that old guy who will like see you wearing a Nirvana shirt or whatever and be like, name 5 Nirvana songs.
Yeah, he's very that. Yeah, like name 5 religions, and this one bites off this one, bites off that one, and this is a copy of this. And I mean, he starts going into how all religions are a copy of the one true religion, how all music is a copy of one band's brilliant brainchild, how movies and characters are all just rip-offs. They're an imitation of an imitation of a copy of an imitation. And he makes some really good points, or at least some really interesting ones, but it is a little it can be a little obnoxious. But
I could see a true horror, like this would go even a step further if his like passion was like telling you that the Beatles were the greatest band of all time.
I really hope, I'm glad you didn't spoil like what his like actual religious beliefs are, because I want to, in my head, I want him to like go through all of this like elaborate like comparative religion stuff, and then be like, and that's why you should be Southern Baptist or something like that at the end, just like something super vanilla.
I'll admit that like when I got to the end of it, or when he reveals like what it is, it is I was okay, sure. But and also like I guess there is something to be said for the fact that I did not see that coming. Like that's fresh, that's inventive. Like you can't really follow where it's gonna go, or at least I couldn't. I mean, maybe there are smarter people than I out there, than me perhaps, but I was surprised and entertained throughout, and then I sort of left the theater like, okay, cool movie. I saw it with my brother, and meanwhile he's like, that really freaked me out, I don't know about that. Like I was like, are you sure? Like,
is that what happens when you're Episcopalian? Oh my gosh.
Like I mean, like he goes to church with my parents more than I do, which is like exactly like one more time a year. So I don't know, maybe he's got it in him, but it pretty good. Yeah, maybe your parents would like it, and then maybe afterwards your mom would throw on Bridget Jones or something.
Let's watch Notting Hill.
Yeah, let's enjoy some 4 weddings and a funeral. Let's relax.
I really like that we have 2 movies in a row with like a kind of last minute twist that we're not revealing, and also we're recommending them to the older folks in our lives.
And that they're religious, sort of like.
And that they're all religious. Yeah.
I don't know what the twist is going to be in Juror 2, but I think I already know because it's part of like.
Yeah, the twist is kind of the whole premise of the movie. The latest film from Clint Eastwood, which he's one of those filmmakers where like every movie could be the swan song. You never know.
I think it's been a swan song since Unforgiven.
He's older than mud.
He's in his 90s.
Gonna say 93. That's gonna be my prediction. Let's see if that's right. 94. I was 1 year shy. Yeah, he's out there kicking, still alive. Malpaso picture still going strong. Although this movie, even though it is about small town America, cannot be seen in small town America. You got to come on up to the big city to see Juror number 2 because of yet another piece of evidence in the case against David Zaslav. And I do feel like people have there's reasons to be jaded about the state of cinema, but I feel like at least people being like upset about Juror number 2 not playing very wide and its sort of release being kind of botched, at the very least I feel like it is more, I don't know, it's been kind of seeing people like make a big deal about like, oh my god, like they scrapped the Batgirl movie or whatever, or like the like Looney Tunes movie or whatever that got canceled, all these things that people have like held against Warner Brothers. It's like, I don't really care about if a Batgirl movie comes out. I feel like this is like at least a little bit more like there's a reason to kind of like be on the side of it. Anyways, so this movie is, you know, kind of just like a very I feel like it has definitely like gotten, you know, the attention of just like a certain kind of cinephile, because it's just very much like one of those movies they don't make anymore, just like a drama for adults with some ideas, you know, but it's not anything like necessarily reinventing the wheel. It stars Nicholas Holt as just a sort of ordinary Joe Sixpack, as you might call him, just a regular American guy who, as happens in America, gets summoned to jury duty, and he has a wife who is like big with child, as they would say in the Bible. And you know, she'd like had a miscarriage previously. It's like a really high risk pregnancy, and he tries to like get out of jury duty so he can be with his wife, and they're like, nope, you got to be on the jury duty. And so it's kind of, this sets it up as this sort of like 12 Angry Men thing, but you know, as Zach hinted, kind of like there's a twist which is pretty upfront in the movie, so it's not really like a spoiler because it's kind of like the whole plot of the movie, which is basically that Nicholas Holt, as he's sort of hearing about this case, you know, of this man who's on trial for the murder of his girlfriend, you know, this like man and woman who were like out drinking one night and got into a fight publicly. She like storms off into the rain, and the next morning her body is found like having like fallen over a bridge, but there's a lot of like head trauma and blunt force kind of trauma that suggests that it was not just like a fall. So Nicholas Holt is like sitting, you know, in the juror's box, hearing about all of this sort of, and he sort of like starts to kind of flash, you know, you start to see just like the events as they're unfolding, and you kind of realize, seeing these flashbacks, that Nicholas Holt was there. And he starts to kind of realize, like, as he's hearing about what happened, that like he was at this bar the night that this woman was murdered, that he saw this couple, and he starts to kind of like, all these memories start to come back, and like the night that this happened was like the night that his the child that his wife had miscarried was supposed to be due, so he was just like in a really depressive state. And you find out that he's also like a recovering alcoholic, like with a history of DUIs, and he's gotten his life together, his life back on track, and is really trying to like turn a fresh page, but he's still kind of haunted by these demons or whatever. And so starts to kind of, through these flashbacks, you start to see him kind of realize in real time that he actually like committed the crime, that he, like, you know, he hadn't been drinking, but he was just like in a really emotional state. It was a really rainy night, and he, like, without realizing it, ran over this woman, and she like falls off the bridge and to her death. And he gets out of the car, it's rainy, it's dark, he just kind of presumes that he's just like struck a deer. And sort of like, as he's hearing about this case and everything, he realizes like, oh my god, like actually, like I'm the person who like ran over this woman and pushed her off this bridge and killed her. And so it's you know, it's a really kind of interesting study, both in like guilt, and this sort of like, you know, it is this kind of like Hitchcockian sort of like wrong man type movie, except like the wrong man is the right man. You know, it's not like this guy is, you know, it's not from the perspective of the guy who is like, you know, innocent and has to try to like prove his innocence. It's a guy who's like guilty, trying to convince everybody that he's innocent. And he sort of starts to like kind of unravel over the course of the movie, because on the one hand, he is like, everybody is like, yeah, this guy seems like scummy, he probably killed his girlfriend, that's like how most domestic violence, that's just usually like 75% of cases or whatever. Like, they're just like, yep, everybody is like ready to convict this guy. Nicholas Hoult, though, knows that like he didn't do it. He did it. So he's like the one person like who starts to kind of convince everybody that this guy's not guilty. But then he realizes like, wait a minute, like if they don't convict this guy, they're going to start investigating again and trying to like figure out who actually committed this crime. And so he starts to like kind of oscillate back and forth between like, doing the right thing, which would be to just like come forward and let this man go. But then he's also like trying to protect himself. And there's also this kind of like, ambiguity, I guess, because that it's like he is doing a bad thing, but you also kind of see these like valid justifications, like he would be abandoning his wife and child and all this stuff. And so you kind of like, I think it does a good job of sort of like, not like just a sort of normal guy, caught up in these like horrible circumstances. And it's like, he does some horrible things, but it just kind of remains this like pretty nuanced view. And also just like outside of Nicholas Holt's performance, which I think is really good. It's a, it's kind of a more of an ensemble piece than I think it's sort of the name, it's not just about Juror Number 2. And it sort of has that kind of like ambiguous approach, just kind of like the whole like justice system. Like Toni Collette plays the prosecutor, the prosecutor from the district attorney's office who's like running for district attorney. And she is just very gung-ho about this case. It's a splashy, like kind of, in all the local papers, just this really kind of scandalous case. And so she's like, if I convict this guy, it will just like seal the deal for like my campaign. And so, the movie kind of starts out with her almost sort of as this kind of like villainous character who like only cares about her job. But as the movie goes on, she starts to kind of realize that like, wait, this guy like might be innocent. I might have been like rash in not investigating any other leads and in talking to anybody else. So she starts to kind of become more complicated too. And you start to see her realize that like this sort of like politicking, side of it had sort of like distracted her from, the actual like moral obligation or whatever. If you believe in all that stuff about, the Constitution and being tried before a jury of your peers and all those kind of things, which I think, as has kind of been the case with the, a lot of Clint Eastwood movies. I mean, people, compare him a lot to John Ford, both in being these filmmakers that have this kind of like outside perception of being like very American, patriotic, nationalistic. But if you kind of like look past the sort of surface level, there's a lot of nuance, kind of ambiguity and sort of uneasiness. And this is a movie where like nobody is really a bad person. They're just all kind of like trying to protect themselves, but then also like do the right thing. And you sort of see that just kind of like tension. So it is also a very much a movie you can take your parents to, because it's like a nice little, it's a thriller, but it's thoughtful, it's not a very like, the conflict of the movie is in like the morals, in the ideas, in the drama. It's not really like, even though there are kind of twists and stuff, it's not really like a plot kind of driven movie. It's more just sort of about these like, I don't know, just
moral quandaries.
Yeah, exactly. Moral quandaries, just the kind of like what is justice really blind,
Yeah.
So Juror Number 2, if it's playing and if you live in a big city, go see it. If you live in small town America, like the characters, that's the irony of this movie. The characters in Juror Number 2 and little small town Georgia, I don't somewhere outside of Atlanta, probably some, I guess Richard Jewell is also, that was like actually like a real story. This is like probably like tax credits and stuff. Everything's made in Atlanta these days.
Yeah.
But yeah, if the characters in Juror Number 2 couldn't go see Juror Number 2. So
the irony of that is that like if you put that movie out in like every place in America outside of like New York and LA, it would probably do amazingly well, because like that's who wants to go see a Clint Eastwood movie in the year 2024 than your grandparents.
Yeah, it's like parents. I went to a matinee screening and it was like 80% like blue hairs, and like then 20% like, cinephiles with the like Criterion Collection tote bag, and it's like, okay, somebody's on film Twitter. Like, you're gonna pull out the Letterboxd app like right after you finish the movie, buddy? Okay, like, so that's the kind of, I always think it's funny when you see those kind of like crowds of like, it's just old people and young people, young and in love with movies.
I don't even make that comment disparagingly. Like literally, like that's who wants to watch, and they like show up in droves for Clint Eastwood movies. Like it's an easy box office layup, is to get old people to go to
hit them with the mule,
Yeah. Nadine, do you want to tell us your 3 thoughts on challengers? And then
I had a 4th thought too.
Perfect.
Bonus
but 3 though is pretty fitting because it's a threesome. The whole movie is a threesome. They're all fucking each other. Like,
4 if you include the tennis ball.
I mean, you could keep going. The racket also is you got balls and a handle, a shaft. Anyways, challengers, Mr. Luca Guadagnino. Everybody's seen this movie, talked about it. It's sexy, scandalous, what have you. What were my thoughts about this? Oh yeah. Number 1, I didn't know you can't swear in tennis, and they should make like an adults only tennis where you can swear. Like, no kids allowed. Just freaking cursing. Also, that's like, that would be really hard. Like, I feel like if I were a professional athlete, I would have to really like be disciplined, not just like at the sport itself, but at like not swearing when I like fuck up.
Yeah, have you ever played tennis? You like all you want to do is swear. It's the most infuriating sport.
Yeah, I would be in the negative love. I'd be losing all my points. The dates, the scene at Applebee's, I kept thinking about this fancy like Applebee's song, but I love also that there's a scene in Applebee's that just feels like such a like European in America kind of thing, like John Baudrillard like writing about like McDonald's or something, or like in Terrence Malick's To the Wonder, where they have like the scene at like Sonic.
I love that.
I love it. It's like Terrence Malick's obviously an American filmmaker, but probably as like European outsider as an American filmmaker could get. But I don't know, just being like, let's have this scene at Applebee's is just like, yep, love it. Like, that's what America is. Also, what was my other thought?
The David Bowie track.
Oh yeah, it's just like such a like middle-aged gay man like needle drop to have this party where you have a bunch of millennials in the 2000s like bopping to Nelly, and then the DJ drops David Bowie's Time Will Crawl. And I'm just like, what is going on here? This is not the real world. Like, this is not what it was like in 2007. Oh, my other thought is I had also like, I was kind of thinking this because I'd like just rewatched Silver Linings Playbook the day before because I got diagnosed with bipolar this year, and I was like, let me rewatch a movie that is like the most famous movie about somebody with bipolar. Yeah. And I was just thinking that I feel like Zendaya is in this kind of like Jennifer Lawrence space in her career, where I felt like for a very long time Jennifer Lawrence has kind of aged into it a little bit more now. For a long time, I felt like she was always playing like older. Like in David O. Russell movies, it feels a little bit like she's like playing dress up sometimes, like where she's like mid-20s playing like a 40-year-old housewife or something like that. And I feel like Zendaya is kind of in a similar space where it's like a lot of this movie, she's playing 40 years old, you know, and she just does not, like, she has like the poise, whatever. Like, I get it, like it's a vibe thing, but I'm like, girl, you're still like 26. Like, you're not middle-aged, like, you know. And like that was just kind of like how I felt about this movie. Like, Zendaya is she's kind of the new Jennifer Lawrence.
I would agree with that point, because I think that's true. Like, the issue I had with her in the movie is like, you have these like scenes where you kind of just need her to like completely like chew up the room, and it's just like, hey, it's my moment, get the fuck out of the way, kind of thing. And to me, it just never like felt like it never felt like she was genuine in that. Like, it kind of felt like she was almost doing an impression of a 40 or an impression of what she thought a 40-year-old would do in that situation.
If she really is the new Jennifer Lawrence, and I'm looking forward to in like 5 or 7 years, like her getting with Aronofsky and making Mother 2 or something.
Ooh, I want to rewatch Mother. That was a
hell of a film.
I feel like I might have gotten. I didn't like Mother at the time, but I think a lot about Mother, and that exclamation mark.
Yeah,
it's like Jeb.
Yeah, the lowercase m exclamation mark.
Remember when Jeb Bush had an exclamation mark?
Jeb. I think about Jeb all the time.
Jeb. I think about Jeb.
Jeb.
What a
Bring
guy.
back Jeb.
Bring back Jeb. And on that note, we're going to be heading into part 2, where we talk about Knock at the Cabin, which does not star Jeb Bush after this. And we're back with part 2 of episode 488 of Cinematary. In this part, we will be concluding our M. Night Shyamalan series with 2023's Knock at the Cabin. Written and directed by M. Night Shyamalan, the film stars Dave Bautista, Jonathan Groff, Ben Aldridge, Nikki Amuka Bird, Abby Quinn, Kristen Cui, and Rupert Grint. While vacationing at a remote cabin in the woods, a young girl and her parents are taken hostage by four armed strangers who demand they make an unthinkable choice to avert the apocalypse. Confused, scared, and with limited access to the outside world, the family must decide what they believe before all is lost. Knock at the Cabin is an adaptation of the 2018 horror novel The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay, who had signed an option with Film Nation Entertainment in late 2017 prior to the book's publication. Had to keep secret that the film was based on one of his novels until July 2022. The Blacklist and Gladlist listed the initial draft of Steve Desmond and Michael Sherman as one of the most popular unproduced screenplays of 2019. While another director was briefly attached, M. Night Shyamalan read the original screenplay and grew interested in producing. He later rewrote the script and came on board to direct the project as part of a two-film partnership between Universal Pictures and his production banner. Old was the first film in that deal. Shyamalan cited Bautista's performance in Blade Runner 2049 as the reason he wanted him to star in Knock at the Cabin. Bautista increased his weight in a short period of time to 315 pounds for the role. In hindsight, he said he overdid it and felt uncomfortably big, which pushed him to lower his weight to 240 pounds, adding, "It took me forever to shed it off, and then I noticed the more I trimmed down, the better I felt." In an interview with Time, Shyamalan said the story reminded him of iconic films like Sophie's Choice and Indecent Proposal. Quote, "I love when a question is asked of a protagonist that makes you put yourself in their shoes to make a decision."
I'm sorry, but
those are the weirdest movies.
That's not what I thought. Sophie's Choice and Indecent Proposal.
The man. Okay, well, he this is what he calls a jury movie, a thriller with a more nuanced take on the mind-bending final twists. The film is not just making an impossible choice, but whether to believe the strange messengers presenting the choice in the first place. Shyamalan, quote, "There is just one moment in the movie, but 15 that are like, oh my God, I believe them. No, I don't. I believe them again. Oh my God, it's not true. I can't believe I believed this for so long. Wait a minute." He went on to say,
it's not butter.
He went on to say, "My movies tend to be about characters that come to realize they're meaningful in some way, that there's a greater thing going on than that they're a part of." Dave Bautista to Variety about taking this role. He said, quote, "I always search out interesting roles, but I take them as they come. I take some pride in what I do because I'm always searching for roles that will challenge me as an actor. I've got my years slated and I know what it's going to look like, but I'm just looking for that next role that's going to give me the same type of fulfillment as this. This fulfilled a lot of my wishes and dreams and what I've been asking for the past 10 years. I'm hoping this will win me a little bit of a respect factor among my peers, because at the end of the day, it's kind of what I'm after. I really want to be respected by my peers." And Shyamalan chose to change the ending of the film and make it different from the book so that it was not as dark and open-ended. The New York Times in 2023 said, "For all its skill and cunning, Knock at the Cabin is an overwrought quasi-theological melodrama that also manages to be a half-baked thought experiment. It's a thrill ride and a toy trolley." Variety said, "If anything, it plays funny games with the genre, perversely asking us to empathize with the strangers. You get the picture. Knock at the Cabin takes a premise audiences think they know and does something unconventional and, alas, frustrating with it. Trouble is, these days, it's no surprise to be let down by a Shyamalan movie." And Richard Brody in The New Yorker in 2023, "In a year that has delivered such models of illiberal retrenchment as Top Gun Maverick, Tar, and Avatar The Way of Water, Knock at the Cabin has the virtue of being the most daring, brazen, imaginative, and radical of them. It's starkly posed as a conflict of faith against reason, and it presents a faith-based order that's ready and willing to use violence in pursuit of its redemptive vision. So far, so apt. What's jolting about Shyamalan's film is its call to capitulation. The director puts the onus on the liberal and progressive element of American society to meet violent religious radicals more than halfway, lest they yield to even worse rages, lest they unleash an apocalypse." Need a little bit more Brody on the podcast. So there you go. Knock at the Cabin. I don't know how y'all, if y'all had watched this when it came out last year. When I rewatched it, I think I kind of felt the same way. Like it's, I enjoy it. I think Dave Bautista is really good. But I kind of get a little. It feels like it runs out of steam after a while. But what do y'all think of Knock at the Cabin?
I don't know. I feel like I like this movie quite a bit. This is like the third time I've seen it, and I feel like I agree to an extent with Richard Brody in the sense of like the ending is really troubling, but also there's I don't know. It's so weird. Like the way it's troubling is so weird. It's like, yeah, the religious people are correct, but it's like they're correct in that, like, what a monstrous belief system, right? Like, and that's a really bizarre thing, you know. It's kind of like if you take like a certain view of Christianity where God wants to send everyone to hell, and so he has to like butcher his son to make sure he doesn't send everyone to hell. Like, if that's correct, that is a kind of horrific belief system, and I feel like this movie kind of does the same thing. And I don't know. I think it's just like, as a thought experiment, it's really kind of upsetting and wild. Like, even for a Shyamalan movie, which Shyamalan's always dealing with faith, but this is like the most like open wound version of that. It feels like, I mean, in a literal way, but like just in terms of like where it takes the ideas. Like, I think when we were talking about The Village, we kind of talked about how like one of the weird things about The Village is how it doesn't really get that much into the ethics of like what the the Village is. But this movie is like all about the ethics of like, what if you had to kill someone to avert the apocalypse? And in the end, what it settles on is like, well, if that were true, it sure would be kind of fucked up. And I don't know. It's a very troubling movie, and I think for that reason, it's hard for me to completely like say how I feel about it, which is like a really exciting thing to think about with the movie. I don't know.
I feel like it's like, I think recently we were talking about The Empty Man, and I just sort of group that movie with, I feel like there's kind of a strain of movies from the last few years, which are not necessarily all like broadly acclaimed popular movies, but I just feel like there's a kind of like particular sort of like kind of like violent I don't know if nihilism is really kind of the right word, but I just feel like there are these movies like The Empty Man. I'd also say The Bye Bye Man.
Oh God, here it goes.
Yeah, but
Reclamation.
I have another Dave Bautista movie, Army of the Dead, too, where they are just, but Knock at the Cabin also, where it's just kind of these movies where like the world is ending and there's no way out, and like the only way out is to like kill yourself, like, you know, and there's something that is just like very uniquely horrifying to me about this movie, and it was really interesting actually like watching it after talking about The Happening, because I feel like you know, I feel like people kind of compare this movie to Signs just in terms of kind of like the isolated location and stuff, but to me like it really felt like kind of like especially sort of after hearing like some of Shyamalan's own sort of like regrets with The Happening, it sort of almost felt to me like a redux of that. Like it feels like if you took that like last stretch of The Happening where Mark Wahlberg and Zoe Deschanel are like separated, and they don't know if it's like, you know, they should die together or, you know, try to stay apart to stay alive at any cost, and then it just kind of like, you know, everything just kind of like stops and the happening stops happening. um I feel like this is kind of a little bit similar, in that there are just these sort of like forces sort of beyond everyone's controls, but also this sort of like question of like, is any of this real? Is it just a delusion? Which I think kind of like The Sixth Sense is also very much about, of just like the, you know, movies where like the delusions end up being real, and the people who are called delusional end up being the ones who are in actually like reality. But there's just like this movie and The Happening really like freak me out just because of that kind of like the relationship to like suicide, and that they're just like these characters who have like no choice but to, like, in The Happening it's like even less of a choice because it's like this biological short circuiting that makes them kill themselves. But in this movie it's like these people who are like have no choice but to like, you know, sacrifice themselves, or like at least they feel, you know, in this very intense, with this very intense conviction that they have no other way to out but that. And just something about like the way, you know, and I think especially because he is like not really, you know, this and The Happening are like his only two like rated R movies, or maybe The Trap was rated R. I don't know, but the very least, just like I feel like he's not really like most of the time a particularly like violent filmmaker, and there's just something about just like in this and The Happening where it's just kind of like these movies where you're like, you have no choice but to kind of like bear witness, almost like, you know, when I feel like that you're sort of like placed in the perspective of Win, where it's just like this child who just is like seeing these horrible fucked up things, and it's just like, you know, that just like, you know, you start to see them put the hood over their heads, and it's just like really freaks me out because it's just like, uh you know, this just complete like loss of control, loss of like agency, loss of individuality. You know, it's like it's one thing to have something outside of, you know, some force outside of yourself, you know, that is the monster or whatever, you know, killing you, but just something about like the sacrifice is really like eerie to me.
Nadine, have you ever seen the movie The Rapture with like David Duchovny and Mimi Rogers? Because it
I have
feels
not,
it's from like the
but
early 90s, so it's not really like of the time period you're talking about, but it's got that same sort of vibe about like kind of central idea about like the kind of loss of control leading to like kind of horrific sacrifice. And then anyway, if you haven't seen it, then
Grace, what did you think of the movie?
This was a second watch for me. I remember the first time just being really emotionally overwhelmed. The cutscenes back to the major milestones in their life as a couple, to flesh these two characters out and to add to their beautiful romance and paint this picture as a couple who, against all odds, has carved out this very beautiful life that is just, it's their own world plus their daughter. How their world begins and ends in their own arms, with what they can hold, and it's each other and their daughter. And then to have to turn that relationship and turn that love on the rest of the world, a world that didn't accept them, couldn't accept them, won't accept them, actively hates them. It's a hard position to be put in, and it's painful to watch. And so I cried a lot through it the first watch. I was also pretty it was definitely very chilling to listen to the sounds of the chains and the tools rattling and the sounds they make as they kill each other with them, and the pulling focus away, or directing attention this way, how blood moves and pours out. It was a very visceral experience. And the second watch, I was also still pretty emotional. I think that this is a pretty powerful movie, and that it can really stir up these feelings of loss, of love, total loss of control. How can you stop what's happening in the world around you when you can't even stop what's right in front of you? We keep talking about loss of control and loss of agency, and this sort of, what is it, like searching for identity? Like we know who Eric and Andrew, we know who they are. And as these people, Sabrina, Adrian, Leonard, and Redmond, who they tell, and we only know who they are because of, what they've told us. And so it's, again, like a question of faith. Do you believe or do you not believe? But I think that this was very good. I haven't seen very many Shyamalan movies. I'll be the first to admit that. He's been a huge blind spot for me. So, I guess I really need to do a little more homework. But at this point, I've seen Knock at the Cabin and Trap, and so they're great, but certainly not enough. I worry that I don't have enough background on Shyamalan to really connect with like the whole oeuvre and how it plays out in this film. But I think that everybody's wrong, and I think that everybody needs a little more empathy. Yeah, anybody that doesn't agree, I think that you need a bigger. Yeah, you're wrong. You need a little more empathy, and you need a bigger heart. And I think that he does a good job. Asking us to empathize and to have compassion. And, then also you think with every tragedy happening right now that is constantly, vying for your attention, either, through your phone screen or your computer screen or in the newspaper or on the radio, it's like you also can really empathize with that feeling of everything being out of your control. And it's like, if only I could do something to make it go away or to change it or, move the needle in either direction. And then the reality is like, if we were truly confronted with that opportunity to give of ourselves, to sacrifice of ourselves, to save everyone else, could we really do it? Would we be able to?
I think also like on that, like having empathy level, like one of the more upsetting things about this movie is kind of like low-key upsetting, but is like really, it gets under my skin, is like the way that like the invaders are, with the exception of Rupert Grint, who's like kind of like an awful like homophobe, but the other three are like, they go out of their way to present themselves as like these caring like people, and like the way that they're asking them to like the people to like kill one of either of the guys is, it's just really, it's like there's something just psychologically really torturous about it, like how like Dave Bautista's performance is so amazing because of all the like regret and dread he puts into like it seems like he genuinely hates what he's doing, but has this just conviction that, well, it must happen. And I don't know. There's just something like about like them, like they give their little like bios like right before they ask them to kill each other, and they're like, hi, I'm a whatever, like a third grade teacher, and I coach, whatever. And this other person's like, I'm a line cook, and there's just something like about like the more you humanize them, the more horrifying it becomes that they're asking this thing. Like the empathy is scary to me. Like, I don't know, like it somehow is less comforting to imagine like good people doing, like asking this thing that is like, really evil, like on behalf of God or whoever, whatever force it is that is doing this. Like, it would be easier to imagine like a kind of nefarious, no good, sadist or whatever to come in, but they're not, they're like pointedly not that. And that's just really like gives me a lot of like angst regarding this movie. I don't know.
There's something like too very sort of eerie and chilling to me about like kind of like what you were just saying, Michael, was making me think about this, of just like the sort of weird contrast like with these weapons that they have, and just the fact that they're just like such normal people, and these are such like abnormal instruments that
why did they all just bring like a handgun?
Yeah, they like feel like these like the like big boss in like Resident Evil, that has like the like big like axe thing. It just feels so like strange and like out of the universe of the movie, and they just feel like so just like so heavy and clunky. And like Grace, you were talking about like the sound that they make, and just how like this movie is just like so, the word is really visceral, of just like there's just something about like, you can tell that this is like a weight that they do not want to carry, and that they do not really know how to, they don't really know what they're doing.
They also have like this like it's not like this manner that they get into when it's like the killing's about to start, and they almost get like orderly, and like they kind of like shake from like their pleading with them, or like and they just get like immediately like they're a soldier, and like stand up and then go into like this, the way that they like get to the ground and put the mask over and like circle around them is very like, it's very cultish, which is kind of like breaking from what we're talking about, where they're just like trying to do everything to like appeal themselves to the family.
It reminds me a lot of, I mean, I don't know, this is my own baggage, but it reminds me a lot of growing up Christian and being taught about evangelizing to people, because like a key element of like getting people to, join your faith is that you have to seem like you're caring. And I mean, in the case of a lot of people, it's not just seem like they're caring, like they are caring within the framework of what they have. But then like you bring people into this faith, and if you're like, conservative Christian, it's like, okay, well, now that you're here, we still care about you, but also if you're gay, then you're going to hell, and like, all this stuff, like the kind of the contrast between like the ways in which like people of faith can often be like very, very kind, and in some ways like very selfless, while at the same time holding beliefs that are like deeply, deeply harmful, or like advocating for things that would like just genuinely harm people en masse. I don't know, like there's something like in microcosm about like that relationship, like as is presented, where like they're not evangelists per se because they're not really asking them to convert, but like the contrast between like these like medieval weapons and like this kind of medieval cosmology that they're bringing with like them like appearing to be like just regular like modern people, who just care about the world just like everyone else does. Like that that dissonance is, I think, really evocative of like how a lot of like, I guess specifically like evangelical Christianity can sometimes come across.
Yeah.
Well, they are asking them to believe and convert and,
convert so you can kill yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the two,
change their mind, convert their feelings. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
And the kind of notion of like, is this like a shared delusion or is this reality? I mean, that's the whole kind of essence of religion. It also too, just like, and I think talking about Heretic in the first half, I grew up Mormon, and I feel like that's something that's just like very they've kind of tried to scrub some of it out, but there is just like a very violent core to a lot of kind of like Mormon theology. There's kind of this whole it's not really a belief that is practiced or taught anymore, but there's kind of an early Mormon tenet of the concept of blood atonement, which basically kind of says that like that even like the most heinous of sins, even murder, can be justified like if it is done to advance God's kingdom, and to like, if you are doing a sin with a like righteous intention, then it's not a sin. And for a very long time, like until the 1990s, like when you did the like secret Mormon temple covenants and rituals and stuff that you like can't talk about in public, there was a part of the ceremony where like you had to like, you basically like swore that like if you revealed this ritual to the rest of the world, that like you would have your throat slit, and you have to like mime like having your throat slit. And so just like something about that contrast of like, I was just thinking about that, Michael, with what you were saying of just like, this religion that on its face is like, missionaries with the tie and collar, just being friendly, doing acts of service for their neighbors, and then this like, like, we will literally like kill you if you step out of line. Just that kind of like, and just that contrast of just like, normal everyday suburban, and then like that like, I feel like medieval is the right word for it, just like bloodshed, fire and brimstone shit.
There's also, and I don't know, I'd be curious like what this is like in the original novel, and how much of this is Shyamalan's touch or whatever. But like, you also have, I mean, there's kind of like the really iconic, in recent history, like the Pat Buchanan, I think it was Pat Buchanan, saying that like Hurricane Katrina was to punish the gay people. And then more recently, Hurricane Helene was said to be the same for Asheville, and things like, that really horrific, like the very like material reality is like ejecting same-sex love. And like, there's a way to read this movie in which that is like saying like, what if that were really the case? What if all that it took to end these natural, like, what if these natural
to kill gay people?
Well, yeah, I mean, like, that's what happens, right? Like, a gay person is asked to die, like basically to end their like same-sex marriage, and that is what's going to calm the nature. And I mean, this is like really biblical like view of the world, where like Jonah in the boat, like the boat's being battered by a storm because Jonah has done something wrong. So Jonah's like, throw me off the ship and that'll stop the storm. And like, there's like that element to it. And like, I don't know, like, again, that's such a deeply troubling thing, like subtext in the movie, especially at the end, like after. I mean, this is a spoiler for those who haven't seen it. I don't know why you would be listening to this, but if you haven't seen it, you know, like one of them does end up dying, being killing himself, and then the movie ends with them going to like a diner where everyone's calling their loved ones, saying like, "I love you so much. I'm so glad you pick up," or whatever. And then the daughter and the remaining guy have to like sit there in the car, just by themselves after hearing all that, and they drive off like listening to the song that they heard driving into that. And it's a weird moment of ambiguity where it's like, how do they feel about that?
Mhm.
You know, how do they feel that like the death of their like a key pillar of their family unit, you know, the rejection of the relationship that they have, you know, is what is sustaining the rest of the world. Like that is, especially in a movie that foregrounds like you know, anti-gay violence. Like that is a subplot in the movie. And one of the guys is like a literal like a human rights attorney who's like prosecuting or helping to try, you know, war criminals and stuff like that. I don't know. It just seems like that there's something going on with that I don't really know what to do. And maybe Richard Brody's right that it is simply like Shyamalan like saying like you know, presenting a kind of assimilation to a world that is just irrevocably violent toward, you know, toward gay folks or toward, you know, progressive causes, that all you can do is kind of assimilate or die. But I don't know, like it feels a little bit like that's simplistic to me, but I don't know how else to square the circle.
It would definitely be a feeling felt in like 2024 over last year. You know, like I think probably people now are like, oh, like there's no shot of like substantial progress. Like this is just what, you know, after earlier this month, like this is just what the country wants pretty much. And we have to like to the point of like the movie, we have to like assimilate into it because there's no space for anything outside the quote unquote norm.
How about that Dave Bautista though?
He's so good in this. Like my God.
We talked a little bit about like kind of his performance. I think the other thing that stands out with him, and I feel you know bad bringing it up because it's clearly was like something that set him back a little bit with like his weight, but I mean just like I think the thing that works for him is just like naturally like his size. Like he is just
he apparently bulked up for this movie, which I think is so interesting that it's like a movie it's like that is, you know, like being more muscular, being bigger isn't like a plus, you know. It's not like he's playing like it's not, he's not taking his shirt off, he's not playing like an action hero. It's like gaining size for this movie like magnifies like the discomfort, you know, because I feel like he is trying so hard to like not be threatening. There's just this kind of like fascinating kind of dichotomy of like you can feel like he is like ashamed of his size almost. And there's just this, I just love the image like at the opening of this movie where like him and Wynn meet and like their hands, just like his hand is so big and her hand is so little. Just
you like see him like you see him like in the outs, like when she first notices him and it's just like this giant man like in the middle of a field. Like it's just like, yeah, that would be terrifying. Like it's different because you're like, yeah, Dave Bautista is a nice person, but like if you saw somebody his size just like standing there that you didn't know, it would be terrifying.
Yeah, the movie does all sorts of interesting like little visual stuff with his size too, like the glasses that he has being like what they are. They seem like slightly too small for his face. There's also the shot when he's he's locked in the bathroom, and then they open up the bathroom door, and you can see the frame of the window's been broken, and there's like a moment of ambiguity about has he crawled out the bathroom window or not.
No way.
And you're like trying to think like, could he have done that? And then like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I think he's just terrific in this, and I hope he did gain the respect of his peers because A, I think it's really sweet that he's just very transparent that he wanted acclaim, and B, I think he deserves it in this movie. He's doing a great job.
It's an interesting parallel to a movie Grace and I saw at Toronto, The Last Showgirl, and he has a role in that where he kind of plays like the
strong silent type. He is the biggest person on screen next to these beautiful little showgirl dancers.
And he's been like the kind of manager behind the scenes for all these years, and it's kind of the same thing where he's just like this big burly guy next to all these like small showgirls. But he's so sweet in the role because he's just like he's very similar, like the way he plays it, because it's kind of awkward because he's like their boss, but at the same time, like you can tell that they all like him because he's very like kind and sweet natured. Yeah.
I feel like one of the things that is just like unique about him as an actor is I feel like so often with not even necessarily with like, you know, somebody like Dwayne Johnson, you know, a fellow wrestler turned actor, but just like any large muscle bound man in movies, like, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger, I feel like is even more this because of his accent too. Just like so often they just kind of like try to just like, oh, this is just like a normal family man, and for some reason he happens to be really fucking large, and we're just like not gonna explain it, you know, he's just like way bigger than every other, like than any normal like American husband would be. And so I feel like Batista has carved out kind of an interesting lane just by like emphasizing this just kind of like dissonance, or this sort of like not trying to like ignore his stature or kind of normalize it, just like sort of like emphasizing like how that he just like doesn't fit, you know, that he is just too large for everything. Also, something to me that I just like love about him is that he has visible scars from blading, which is a practice in wrestling where you basically like, you know, obviously like wrestlers, like it is real blood, but it's kind of bleeding in wrestling is kind of a special effect because instead of like busting open for real or the hard way as they call it, wrestlers will sneak in a tiny razor blade on your wristband, and in a crucial moment a wrestler will covertly, discreetly like slice open their forehead because it kind of like makes like shallower wounds up there that are like easier to heal, but also because you have so much sweat like coming down from your forehead, it makes it look like there's a lot more like blood flow than there actually is. And so a lot of wrestlers, like there are some wrestlers who are, it's like look up like Abdullah the Butcher, like this motherfucker had like real like deep indents in his head from doing this so often, where he literally like as a party trick would like stick like coins in the dents on his forehead and they would stay there. Dave Bautista's are not that pronounced, but Dave Bautista does have like visible, you can see on the top of his head, he has these kind of like scars, and those are from blading. And I just kind of like love that ended up, you know, a probable eventual Oscar nominee has these like visible scars from his former life as a professional wrestler. But it also just shows how far, you know, wrestlers will go for their craft and how far a man like Dave Bautista, you know, will go for his craft. Like that's real acting right there, is like, I will cut myself for, I mean, that's kind of like Knock at the Cabin in a nutshell a little bit, you know, like I believe in this thing so hard, I will shed my own blood for it, you know, and that's pro wrestling too. So Batista kind of perfect for this.
Knock at the Cabin, best wrestling movie of 2023.
Probably so. Probably, I don't know. There wasn't a.
Didn't Iron Claw
Iron Claw did come out.
I'm like, I don't know. Iron Claw's really good.
Yeah, Iron Claw was, you know, it's a good movie. It's a good movie. I have thoughts about it, but that's a whole other episode. I'll just be an episode by myself.
It's just Nadine in here just being like Iron Claw.
Yeah.
Any other closing thoughts before we wrap up?
I do think that like one thing that we've talked about kind of on and off in this series is like that Shyamalan touch to the dialogue, and this movie's a little bit calmer on that than some of them, but there's still some good little little zingers there. But like I think one of the things that makes it, you know, maybe a little bit more unsettling than some of his others is that like you get fewer of those like kind of weird little like writerly non sequiturs that he likes to throw in. And so although I do feel like it's big like Shyamalan vibes when the girl is introducing herself as a line cook and then like gives her like whole like little life story.
Yeah, something about her just like kind of like goofy manner feels like the most sort of like Shyamalan that, you know, I feel like she could just very easily start talking about hot dogs.
Yeah.
You know? So
I miss the hot dog.
It is like definitely like there is something kind of a little bit more like blunt, you know, about the writing in this movie. I feel like it's much more about, like you were saying, those kind of like writerly touches. Like I feel like it is like it's just like much more like conceptual, I guess, I think, rather than kind of like getting into the weird little details. And I don't know.
One thing we talked about off mic was that this is his only adaptation of a previous work, if you don't count The Last Airbender. I wonder if that has something to do with it.
Yeah, I felt like the two big like lines that like really underscored the movie for me was when Sabrina's patching up Eric with his concussion, you know, believe in something bigger than yourself, believe in something bigger than yourself. And then when Dave Bautista says, what I love about working with children, you know, his last sort of, you know, monologue before he takes his own life is, you know, the best part about teaching children is they believe anything you tell them. So you have to be careful what you say to them, and it's hard to do. So those were like two big standouts for me, and they really drove the movie home. You know, what are we teaching our children, or what are we teaching those, you know, that look to us for understanding and guidance and help when things get tough? And then, you know, is it responsible to tell children to believe in something bigger than themselves, or, you know, is that a responsible thing to say? And those two are sort of in opposition to each other, I wonder. But yeah,
those lines have big science vibes now that I'm thinking about it, like swing away Merrill, that element.
All right, well, that'll wrap our M. Night Shyamalan series. Thanks for listening. You can find us on Instagram and on, I'm trying to think of the ones we're promoting now. Instagram and Letterboxd. Instagram handles at Cinematary. Letterboxd is letterboxd.com/Cinematary. Follow the Instagram page. That's not great. I'll talk about that later. All right. Grace. Grace has a bunch of good content on the Cinematary IG page, so be sure to follow us there. Patreon.com/Cinematary, where we, if you'd like to support the show, and it's a good time to become a patron on Patreon, because our next series for the next 2 episodes are Patreon picks. So if you're listening to this, we probably will have not decided what the movie is yet. So if you want to toss us, you listen on Friday or Saturday or Sunday, like toss us $1, and we'll watch whatever the hell you want us to watch. But thank you to our patrons: Cam, Ron Hayes, Tanner Huskins, Teresa Marsati, and Tyler Chandler. We appreciate your patronage, and we'll probably be seeing a movie from one of y'all or 2 of y'all in the next couple weeks. So until then, thanks for listening. We'll see y'all next episode.